Hi, my name is Karen, and I'm an American lay student of Ajahn Sachat, or Pra Ajahn Sachat Abhijato, who has given me the very special honor of being asked by him to record this book for you. This book was written by Pra Ajahn Sachat's own teacher, the Venerable Acariya Mun Nanasampanno, and is a spiritual biography written by him about his teacher, the Venerable Acariya Mun Biography. The title of the book is Venerable Acariya Mun Biography, a spiritual biography by Acariya Mun Nanasampanno, and it was published in 2005, translated into English by Bhikkhu Dick Silaratano. If you would like to learn how to download or get a hard copy of this book, or a list of which pages or chapters are read on each separate recording, please listen to the beginning of the first recording of this book. This book, in any form, is to be given away for free. Any ads you may see or hear in this recording have been put there by the platform you are using to listen or view with, for its own revenue, in exchange for letting us use their platform for free. Please forgive me for any mispronunciations of names, places, or words, as I'm still learning how to pronounce Thai and Pali, and for any background noises, as I'm just making these recordings in my apartment with an unruly dog and in the middle of a city. And we're resuming today on page 73. We're in chapter 2, and we are still in the section titled A Monk's Fear of Ghosts. Wearing only the 3 principal robes is another Dhutanga observance that Acariya Mun followed religiously from the day he first ordained until old age and declining health eventually forced him to relax his strict adherence somewhat. In those days, Dhutanga monks rarely settled in one location for very long, except during the 3 months of the rainy season retreat. They wandered through forests and mountains, traveling by foot the whole way, since there were no automobiles back then. Each monk had to carry his own belongings. He could expect no help from others. For this reason, each monk took with him only as much as he could conveniently manage. Since it was awkward to be loaded down with too many things, only absolute essentials were taken. As time went on, this frugal attitude became an integral part of a monk's character. Should someone give him something extra, he would simply give it away to another monk to avoid accumulating unnecessary possessions. The true beauty of a Dhutanga monk lies with the quality of his practice and the simplicity of his life. When he dies, he leaves behind only his 8 basic requisites, the only true necessities of his magnificent way of life. While he's alive, he lives majestically in poverty, the poverty of a monk. Upon death, he is well gone with no attachments whatsoever. Human beings and devas alike sing praises to the monk who dies in honorable poverty, free of all worldly attachments. So the ascetic practice of wearing only the 3 principal robes will always be a badge of honor, complementing Dhutanga monks. Acariya Mun was conscientious in the way he practiced all the Dhutanga observances mentioned above. He became so skillful and proficient with them that it would be hard to find anyone of his equal today. He also made a point of teaching the monks under his tutelage to train themselves using these same ascetic methods. He directed them to live in remote wilderness areas, places that were lonely and frightening, for example, at the foot of a tree, high in the mountains, in caves, under overhanging rocks, and in cemeteries. He took the lead in teaching them to consider their daily alms round a solemn duty, advising them to eschew food offered later. Once lay devotees in the village became familiar with his strict observance of this practice, they would put all their food offerings into the monks' bowls, making it unnecessary to offer additional food at the monastery. He advised his disciples to eat all food mixed together in their bowls, and to avoid eating from other containers. And he showed them the way by eating only one meal each day until the very last day of his life. Wandering by stages across the Northeast, Acariya Mun gradually attracted increasing numbers of disciples at every new location along the way. When he stopped to settle in one place for some time, scores of monks gravitated to that area to live with him. Having set up a temporary monastic community in the forest, 60 to 70 monks would gather there, while many more stayed close by in the surrounding area. Acariya Mun always tried to keep his disciples spread apart, living in separate locations that were not too close to one another, yet close enough to his residence so that they could easily seek his advice when they encountered problems in their meditation. This arrangement was convenient for all, for when too many monks are living in close proximity, it can become a hindrance to meditation. On the Uposatha observance days, when the Patimokkha was recited, Dutanga monks came from various locations in his vicinity to assemble at his residence. After the recitation of the Patimokkha, Acariya Mun addressed the whole assembly with a discourse on Dhamma, and then answered the monks' questions one by one until their doubts cleared up and everyone was satisfied. Each monk then returned to his own separate location, buoyed by the exposition of Dhamma he had just heard, and resumed his meditation practice with renewed enthusiasm. Although he sometimes had large groups of monks staying to train with him, he found them easy to supervise because they were all prepared to put what he taught into practice for their own spiritual benefit. Monastic life under his tutelage was so orderly and quiet that the monastery often appeared deserted. Excepting meal times and times when the monks assembled for meetings, a visitor coming at any other hour wouldn't have seen the monks. The place would have looked deserted, with each monk having slipped into the dense forest to diligently pursue walking or sitting meditation in his own secluded spot, day and night. Acariya Mun often assembled the monks in the evenings at about dusk to give a discourse on Dhamma. As the monks sat together quietly listening, Acariya Mun's voice was the only sound they heard. The rhythm of his voice articulating the essence of Dhamma was at once lyrical and captivating. Carried along by the flow of his teaching, his audience completely forgot themselves, their weariness, and the time that passed. Listening, they were aware only of the flow of Dhamma having an impact on their hearts, creating such a pleasant feeling that they could never get enough of it. Each of these meetings lasted many hours. Within the circle of Dutanga monks, listening to a Dhamma discourse in this way is considered another form of meditation practice. Dutanga monks have an especially high regard for their teacher and his verbal instructions. He constantly guides and admonishes them to such good effect that they tend to view his teachings as the lifeblood of their meditation practice. Showing the utmost respect and affection for their teacher, they are even willing to sacrifice their lives for him. The Venerable Ananda is an excellent case in point. He had such unwavering affection for the Buddha that he was willing to sacrifice his life by throwing himself into the path of the wild charging elephant that Devadatta had let loose in an attempt to kill the Buddha. In Acariya Mun's case, Dutanga monks listened to his instructions with great reverence, enthusiastically taking them to heart. This was especially evident when he advised one of his monks to go live in a certain cave in order to give his practice new impetus. Monks singled out in this manner never objected, but faithfully followed his recommendations with genuine conviction, refusing to allow fear or concern for their safety to become an issue. Instead, they were pleased, feeling that their practice was bound to be strengthened by living in the locations he recommended. This, in turn, infused them with determination to strive relentlessly both day and night. They were convinced that if Acariya Mun suggested a certain location to them, then their efforts there were sure to be rewarded with good results, as though they had received an assurance of success from him in advance. This could be likened to the assurance that the Lord Buddha gave to the Venerable Ananda just prior to his parinibbana, when he told him that in 3 months' time his heart would be free from all kilesas. He was predicting that the Venerable Ananda was certain to attain enlightenment, becoming an arahant on the opening day of the first Sangha Council. It's obvious that devout obedience to the teacher is vitally important. It engenders an unwavering interest in practice, guards against carelessness and apathy, and so helps to anchor the basic principles of Dhamma in the disciple's heart. It facilitates the establishment of a common understanding between teacher and disciple, so that instructions need not be repeated over and over until it becomes annoying and tiresome for both parties. Acariya Mun's second trip to the Northeast was a cause for much interest and excitement among monks and lay supporters throughout the region. During that period, he traveled extensively, teaching in almost all the northeastern provinces. He passed initially through Nakhon Ratchasima, then through Si Saket, Ubon Ratchathani, Nakhon Panom, Sakon Nakhon, Udon Thani, Nong Khai, Loi, Lomsak, and Phetchabun, and occasionally crossed the Mekong River into Laos to visit Vientiane and Ta Kek. He crisscrossed these areas many times in those days, but he preferred to remain longer in provinces that were mountainous and thickly forested, because they were especially suitable for meditation. For instance, south and southwest of the town of Sakon Nakhon, there were many forest-covered mountain ranges where he spent the rains retreat near the village of Pon Sawang in the district of Sawang Dandin. The mountainous terrain in this area is so conducive to the ascetic way of life that it is still frequented by Dhutanga monks today. Monks wandering in such areas during the dry season usually slept out in the forest on small bamboo platforms. They were made by splitting sections of bamboo lengthwise, spreading them out flat, then securing them to a bamboo frame with legs, making a raised sleeping surface of about 6 feet long, 3 or 4 feet wide, and about 1.5 feet above the ground. One platform was constructed for each monk and was spaced as far apart from another as the living area of the forest would allow. A large tract of forest allowed spacing of at least 120 feet, with the thick foliage in between each platform acting as a natural screen. If the area was relatively small, or a large group of monks lived together in the area, then the spacing might be reduced to 90 feet intervals, though the minimum distance was usually 120 feet. The fewer the number of monks living in a particular area, the farther apart they were individually, being close enough to one another only to hear the distant sound of a cough or a sneeze. Local villagers helped each monk to clear a walking meditation track approximately 60 feet in length, which was located beside his sleeping platform. These tracks were used day and night for practicing meditation in a walking mode. When monks fearful of ghosts or tigers came to train under Acariya Mun, he usually made them stay alone, far from the rest of the monks, a severe training method designed to draw attention to the fear so that the monk could learn to come to grips with it. He was required to remain there until he became accustomed to the wilderness environment and inured to the tigers and ghosts that his mind conjured up to deceive him. The expectation was that in the end, he would achieve the same good results as others who had trained themselves in this way. Then he wouldn't have to carry such a burden of fear indefinitely. Acariya Mun believed this method accomplished better results than simply leaving a monk to his own devices, and to the very real prospect that he might never find the courage to face his fears. Upon arriving in a new location, a Dhutanga monk had to first sleep on the ground, collecting various kinds of leaves, or in some places straw, to make a crude mattress. Acariya Mun said that the months of December and January were especially difficult due to the prevailing seasonal weather patterns, as the approaching cold weather met and mixed with the outgoing rainy weather. When it did rain during the winter months, a monk inevitably got drenched. Sometimes it rained continuously all night, and the umbrella tent he used as shelter was no match for the driving rain and high winds. Still, he had no choice but to sit shivering under his makeshift shelter, enduring the dank cold and unable to move, for it was impossible to see in the dark. A downpour during the daylight hours was not quite so bad. A monk still got wet, but at least he could see his surroundings and search for things in the forest to help shelter him from the elements without feeling totally blind. Essential items like his outer robe and his matches had to be kept in his alms bowl with the lid tightly secured. Folding his upper robe in half, he draped it around himself to keep out the cold and damp. The cloth mosquito net that hung from the suspended umbrella down to the ground formed a tent-like shelter that was indispensable for blocking out the windswept rain. Otherwise, everything got soaked, and he had to endure the discomfort of having no dry robe to wear in the morning for alms round. The months of February, March, and April saw the weather change again as it began to heat up. Normally, Dhutanga monks then moved up into the mountains, seeking out caves or overhanging cliffs to shelter them from the sun and the rain. Had they gone to these mountainous locations in December and January, the ground would still have been saturated from the rainy season, exposing them to the risk of malarial infection. Malarial fever was never easy to cure. Many months could pass before the symptoms finally went away. It could easily develop into a chronic condition, the fever recurring at regular intervals. This kind of chronic malaria was locally referred to as the fever the in-laws despise, for its victims can eat well enough, but they can't do any work because the fever is so debilitating. In such cases, not only the in-laws, but also everyone else became fed up. No effective remedies for malaria existed then, so those who caught it had to just let it run its course. I myself quite often suffered from such chastening fevers, and I too had to let them run their course, as we had no medicines to treat malaria in those days. Acariya Mun used to say that most of the Dhutanga monks he knew during that period had been infected with malaria, including himself and many of his disciples. Some even died of it. Listening to those accounts, one couldn't help feeling a profound sympathy for him and his monks. He nearly died before gaining the necessary understanding to teach the way of Dhamma to his disciples, so they too could practice following his example. And we're going to end there today. We're on page 79, close to the top of it, and that was the ending of the section in chapter 2 titled A Monk's Fear of Ghosts, and we're going to begin a new section still in chapter 2 titled Local Customs and Beliefs in the next recording. Until then, with metta, bye-bye.